Good evening. This is Dale Wetzel. This is Dale Wetzel. We're broadcasting from Peacock Alley, American Bar and Grill, in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. Looks as if the bar is starting to fill up a bit as folks come in to have a drink after work or maybe have a meal. And it's a wonderful place to do either one. We have with us this evening the governor of North Dakota, Jack Dalrymple. He's a Republican. He's a former state legislator. He's a former chairman of the board of one of the leading pasta manufacturers in North Dakota, and a general world-bestriding gentleman. And we will be speaking to him about a number of things. First of all, we're going to go through a bit about what happened in the legislature today. There were a number of bills of moderate import that the legislature dealt with today. One of them will be of interest to anyone who's thinking about circulating an initiative or a referendum petition anytime in the future. If you write down names on that petition that are not your own, in other words, if you do the North Dakota State University football player trick and go into the phone book and write down names on a petition, you could be charged with felony crime that could get you in the house for 5 years and a $5,000 fine. There was also a bill approved today to extend some tax credits to encourage the development of natural gas that is now being flared in western North Dakota. Flaring of gas means it's being burned as it's being produced. It's being wasted. And the reason it's being wasted is because there is not a sufficient pipeline network to collect all of this gas and process it. And one of the bills that the North Dakota Senate approved today would extend some tax incentives that would make it more attractive for companies to do this. We also had the defeat of legislation that would require North Dakota's pension funds to divest themselves of their holdings in companies that directly do business with the nation of Iran. That approach has been frowned upon traditionally by the legislature in terms of linking state pension investments to political considerations. And we also have an expansion of the Rebuilders Loan Program that has benefited folks in Minot rebuild their homes. This would help them to use this money if they chose to purchase FEMA trailers that are up there now. It also adds a bit of money to this Rebuilders Fund for the use of folks who need it. We'll get right now to our questions for the governor, Jack Dalrymple. First of all, Governor, how do you think the session's going? I mean, you as a member of the North Dakota House, you saw more than one of these things kind of chug along to its conclusion. And what is your assessment of this one?
Dale, this session is par for the course. I think it's right on the track that you would expect at this point. Coming down the last 3 weeks or so, and all of a sudden everybody's realizing that by golly, we do have to get busy here. It may not be that easy to wrap it up in 3 weeks. So I think people are starting to bear down.
One of the things that is going to be a major bone of contention here is whether or not the state increases contributions along with employees to the state pension funds. As you know, the House has defeated the idea of increasing contributions to the pension funds. There was a step taken today in which there was a possible pension fund backstop fund out of oil taxes that was also defeated. Where do you think this is going to end up, and what sort of effect do you think it will have if these pension funds do not get higher contributions from their beneficiaries and from the state government?
Well, Dale, I think that higher contributions are going to be necessary any way you look at it, and I'm hopeful that the House and Senate will work this out before it's all over. Really, in order to keep a pension plan actuarially sound over the long haul, you need to have the proper revenue stream, over many, many years in order to make that work. And some people have talked about, let's just put a bunch of surplus cash right into the fund. But what they don't realize is that from an actuarial standpoint, you don't get much bang for the buck, so to speak. You can put in a whole bunch of money and it doesn't really show up in what's going to happen 30 years from now. So I think we do have to get to a place where this is sound. The public employees and the teachers place a very high value on their pensions. Their contribution is relatively high in comparison to their salary levels, but they want this, and they've said over and over, take that extra 2% out of my check. I want to know that pension plan is going to be sound.
What do you think about the philosophy that defined benefit pension plans, such as the state employees have, are something that is not sustainable, and that eventually employees in state government and elsewhere are going to have to rely upon a 401k style plan?
Well, I think defined benefit is a wonderful thing, and wouldn't we all like to have it? I mean, being able to retire and know that that payment is going to come to you, as long as you live. That's a pretty nice deal. It is expensive. It is difficult to administrate and difficult to manage and difficult to keep sound financially. So there's been a lot of talk about that. And, people are saying, is this too burdensome? Is it getting to be too large a percentage of their compensation? Should we be looking at defined contribution? I think for now, for the people who are in the middle of their career or later, we need to stay the course. What we can do, I think, is look at a slightly different set of rules for the people who are coming into state government in the future.
And what sort of different set of rules would you support?
Well, I think the greatest problem is created by what they call the assumed investment return. And for many years, our assumed investment return on our pension plans was 8% per year. In the good old days, that wasn't that difficult. And some years when we went ahead like 24%, everybody said, "Oh man, we could do even more than that." We now know that that's like a pretty high target. A lot of states have adjusted to 5 or 6% expected returns. So you have to adjust to the realities of the financial world, and that's what I'm talking about.
Do you see the defined benefit pension plan as something that eventually is going to be discontinued?
You'd have to look very far into the future. I think what we will see is a kind of a hybrid of it, where you actually have like an account with the state of North Dakota, and you have a savings balance, and every year a certain percentage of interest would be added to your savings account. What a lot of people want to know more than anything is that their pension fund will not be lost, that it will not go bankrupt. Somehow when they retire, it will not be available. That's the main thing. So I think that kind of a model for the long haul looks better.
The House Majority Leader, Al Carlson, is offering an amendment to the Constitution to create a Department of Higher Education, which would give you the authority to hire someone who would supervise the university system. Do you support that?
Hard to imagine me not wanting to take over the university system, right, Dale? Gee, what could be better? No,
you don't have enough. I see you don't have enough to do, so I figured we might as well give you something else.
Yeah, no, that is not the solution that I would choose. For the problems that people talk about. I think the system that we have today is a perfectly fine system. It's an independent group of people. We created it about 80 years ago because the politicians were kind of getting out of control and doing some things that they shouldn't have been doing. So I think an independent group is a perfectly good model, but you have to execute. and it's like anything else. That you need to work at it.
To what extent is the execution going well in the higher education system in North Dakota?
Well, we're in a bit of a kind of a stress period, I guess you could say, right now. There's been some criticism of how things are going. I think that we currently do have a board that has the ability to get this all back on track, and I think they will.
Do you think that the chancellor is doing a good job?
Well, I don't know what you mean by a good job. I mean,
would you hire him again?
Well, listen, I have said publicly that I think that our current chancellor is off to somewhat of a rocky start. But I think we know why that is. He's a pretty aggressive guy. He's got some very definite ideas on what he would like to see happen to higher education. He wants to bring in some disciplines that we haven't had before. And, people don't like to move as quickly, perhaps, as he would like them to move. So there's a natural tension there, a natural conflict. And I think these things will all be worked out.
So do you think that the board made the right choice in hiring him?
Well, it's not my decision. I think the board wanted a person who would be aggressive, who would be forceful and strong, and would be able to tell our campuses what they need to do to improve and become a better system. That's what they wanted, and I think that's what they got.
There's, at the beginning of the session, before the session even began, you took part in a press conference in West Fargo to unveil legislation to toughen the penalties for drunken driving. And now we have one bill left to do that, and essentially what it does is it doubles the mandatory fine for a first-time offender. It gives at least 2 days in jail or 20 hours community service for someone on their first offense if they have a 0.18% blood alcohol content or greater. And there are also some new criminal vehicular homicide charges that can be brought against someone who kills someone else if they are if the person is drunk and they're in an accident and they kill someone else. They can be charged with, they can be made to serve at least 3 years in prison. And if they cause a serious injury, they can be made to serve at least 1 year in prison. What is your assessment of whether this adequately meets the goals that you sought to meet in this session?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction. I know there are people who are disappointed that the bill is not as strong as it was when it was introduced. And I do feel that we are in a time when people do want to see some tougher laws on this, and they're tired of some of the terrible accidents that they see. But, Dale, I think we have to say, this is a movement in the right direction, and we need to praise the legislature for, making some changes. And it's something that, is there all the time, and we can continue to work on that as time goes by.
Is this enough of a change in the right direction in your judgment?
Well, we'll see what they finally pass. I think there are some people who are still trying to get some things in that are a bit tougher. But in the end, we'll see what the final product is, and then we'll make a judgment about that.
What is your assessment of the legislature's efforts to expand the Medicaid program? Right now, that bill, it has a 2-year life. It's not a permanent expansion of Medicaid. It also turns over the job, or actually requires the job to be contracted out in terms of providing coverage to private insurance companies or the federal health insurance exchange. Is that something that you support?
Well, yes, I think that we should do it. There's been a lot of strong feelings about that all winter because, we have a super majority of people who feel that so-called Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, like never should have been enacted. It's not a good piece of legislation. It's not the right direction to go. But the fact of the matter is, where we are right now, money has been set aside for Medicaid expansion. And the question is just, do you want to pick it up or do you want to leave it on the table? If we don't take it, it's just going to some other state. So, yes, I think, we need to say to ourselves, there's a lot of people in North Dakota that can benefit from this. And we should go ahead and, at least for the next couple of years until things become clearer, we should participate.
Do you get much external pressure, pressure from outside the state to not go along with the Affordable Care Act in terms of expanding Medicaid?
Well, I wouldn't say like serious pressure. I know that, there are many states, that are trying to sort of hold the line on this and create some kind of leverage on the Congress. But I don't really think that this is the place to do battle and the place to, try to create leverage. It's some Medicaid dollars for a year or two. We need to be focused on the long-term policy of the Affordable Care Act and making it better.
When your budget came out, the legislators, a number of legislators, wondered about the levels of spending that were included therein. Now, the legislative budget is $660 million greater than what you wanted. What do you think about the legislature's proclivities to spend money so far in this session? Because according to the Legislative Council, which is the research arm of the legislature, the budget at the present time is $661,164,622 out of balance, and that is a big chunk of change.
And that's what I mean when I say they got a little work to do in the next 3 weeks, and it's going to take some doing. Dale, you've been around long enough to know in this legislative scene that, it's kind of par for the course for the budget status to be well in excess at this stage of the game. And I think we just have to watch and trust that the legislature will whittle that down substantially before it's all over.
One of the things that you've been doing is trying to essentially negotiate a new oil tax sharing agreement with the 3 affiliated tribes. Could you talk about how that's going? You're shaking your head as I speak to you, just so that the listeners know that. This must be a vexing subject for the governor.
Well, this is supposed to be radio. I'm supposed to be able to make any face I want.
Well, I'm not going to tell them about the bottle of beer you got in front of you. No,
I do not have a bottle of beer in front of me, although there wouldn't be anything wrong with that. But, Dale, that is a tough one. It's well, let me just back up and say that a few years back, the state of North Dakota was able to negotiate a tax agreement with the tribes in which we share the tax revenue, with the tribes in such a way that to an outside oil company, the tax looks the same whether they're on the reservation or off the reservation. That was a breakthrough agreement that we made. Ryan Bernstein was the legal counsel in the governor's office at that time. I officed right next to him. He spent 3 years working on crafting that agreement. As soon as that agreement took effect, oil companies poured into the reservation and began drilling. And today, the oil production on the reservation is fantastic. And the amount of revenues that are going to be coming to them in the next 2 years are really astounding. So I think we need to say that, it was a great thing that the tribes were able to get together with the state and come to an equitable agreement that everybody's comfortable with. Now, they would like to revise it. There's no question about that. We've been talking with them about that, and I am hopeful that we can make some amendments to it that make sense and continue this good relationship.
Do you think that there's any possibility that the tribe will abrogate the agreement? And if so, what would the impact be on oil exploration in North Dakota and the state budget?
I really don't think, we should even talk like that. I mean, we're partners in this today. I think we should continue as partners. It's good for everybody. It keeps the oil producers comfortable that this is a good place to do business. And I think it's a win-win deal. So, my great hope is that we can work this out.
What was it like to go through the storm after you signed the abortion legislation?
Well, I don't know if storm is the right word exactly.
Hurricane, maybe?
We heard from literally thousands of people on both sides of this issue. It's a very emotional issue for a lot of people. And we knew that a lot of people would want to let us know what they think. But in the end, I tried to look at this from more of an intellectual standpoint, trying to understand it as best I could. And it's just one of those very unique issues where, finding a middle ground is pretty tough.
Is it possible?
In many ways, it's not. It's probably one of the more black and white things out there. But these bills do attempt to split the hairs. The Supreme Court has ruled that abortions can be outlawed by states after 24 weeks of gestation. They have opened the door to restrictions on abortion. And that means that the potential for further restrictions exists. And that's what these bills are about. These are questions that the legislature wants to ask of the federal courts.
We've been speaking to Governor Jack Dalrymple. He is a Republican from Castleton, North Dakota, one of, I think, 5 governors that comes from Castleton, North Dakota. He's a former lieutenant governor, a former state legislator, a former chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. Thank you for your time, Governor.
You bet. Dale, good to talk with you always.
It's your chance.
This is Dale Wetzel. This is the Legislature Today radio program. We are coming to you from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. We're going to be speaking about state pensions for the next half hour. We have with us to help discuss the subject, we have Representative Jim Casper. He is a Republican from Fargo and the chairman of the Senate Government and Veterans Affairs Committee. We also have Senator Carolyn Nelson. She's a Democrat from Fargo and a longtime member of a legislative interim committee called the Employee Benefits Programs Committee, which goes over the state pension plans and the health thereof in some detail during the interim between sessions, and so she's intimately familiar with the subject of state pensions. And first of all, just to set the stage a bit, we have a situation where the governor, Jack Dalrymple, who we were just talking to a moment ago, suggested that in the next 2 years that pension contributions to the pension fund from both state employees and the state government be increased by 1% by each party both this year and next year as a way to increase the soundness of the pension fund, which is right now about 68% funded, between 65 and 70% funded, according to the North Dakota Public Employees Retirement System. The North Dakota House killed this proposal. It has since been restored in a bill that Representative Casper sponsored, which Representative Casper intended to do something entirely different, which he'll be discussing in a moment. And essentially we're going to be talking about whether it is a good policy to increase the contributions to the pension funds as a way to restore their health. Senator Nelson, could you talk about why you believe that the increased contribution plan, the rescue plan as it's been called, that was first approved 2 years ago by the legislature, why you think that's a good approach?
Well, it was studied in 2010 and in 2012 by the Employee Benefits Programs Committee. And it was also devised, basically, by all of the people who were involved. Now, several years ago, we did do a complete recovery plan for the Teachers Fund. But when it came to the PERS plan, we said, let's just take the first half of that and then see how it does and see what the pension, what the stock market does, and we'll revisit it in 2 years. But 4 years ago, all of the people came together to talk about what is the best way to cause a recovery for these plans. And that would, in the teachers' plan, involve the teachers, the administrators, the school boards, the retirees. They all agreed that everybody would take somewhat of a hit, but in the long run, that it would stabilize the fund.
Representative Casper, you introduced a bill at the beginning of the session that gives new state employees, new hires, the option of going into a defined contribution plan rather than the defined benefit plan. First of all, could you mention why you did that, and also could you explain for us the difference between the two types of plans?
Well, Dale, I was listening while I was driving into your conversation with the governor, and he touched a little bit about where and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but where he sees down the road where we might be going to a defined contribution plan for new hires. The defined benefit plan is a plan that guarantees a retirement benefit to an employee. It assumes a certain interest rate of earnings, and it assumes a retirement date. The state has monkeyed with the formula with the defined benefit plan for a number of years. We used to have the rule of 90, which your years of service and your age, if it equaled 90, you could retire with full benefits. That's been reduced to the rule of 85, which was a big mistake in looking back. But because what that does, it means you have to earn more dollars quicker to get to the point where you can fully fund it. And that's where the problem is. You use an 8% assumption to project your dollars. If you don't earn 8%, you get down in the toilet, which is where we're at the 68% funding. But we have the way you calculate the unfunded liability, which is the 68%, is by taking the last 5 years' average earnings. And so right now, if we go back 5 years, we pick up a 2008 and 2007, a little bit of 7 and 8. And those are the dark years. Those are the years when the stock market went down by 50%. The good news is that the stock market has fully recovered, but we're not being able to reflect that in the way the smoothing formula works. So therefore,
because it's part of this average, right?
That's right, because of the 5-year average. And therefore, my point and the point of the House is, right now we don't know where the stock market is going to go in the next 2 years. We know it's come up substantially. We're not in any crisis that we have to put extra money in now. Once you fund the dollars now, they're in there forever as far as the state's contribution. And the cost to continue, if we go forward with a funding formula for the PERS plan, I think over the next biennium would be about $47 million per biennium once we reach it. That's forever that the state has to fund. And what we're saying in the House, and myself in particular, is let's hold off on that funding for the next 2 years. Let's see where the market goes. Let's get that 5-year smoothing average out there where we can pick up the last 5 years. Maybe we don't need to make those contributions. The fund will take care of itself.
Does that approach, though, carry the risk of putting the fund kind of further behind?
It could put the fund further behind if we have another dump in the stock market. But if you look at the corporate earnings sheets and you look at what they're doing, the corporations in the United States and worldwide are making a lot of money because they're not hiring, they're not expanding, they're selling their goods and services with the employees they have because they're scared to death in the United States of Obamacare. So they're not going to expand because they don't know where that's going. They don't know where the tax structure is going. So they're making good profits because American workers are productive. So they're very profitable. The stock market numbers and where the market goes is to a large part based, one, on the profitability of the companies that are indexed, and number two, on whether or not the people have confidence in where we're going in the country. And it appears that the confidence level of the people in our nation is coming up slightly. It's not where it needs to be. A lot of work needs to be done by the Congress, but we're getting closer.
Senator Nelson, do you believe that the defined benefit pension structure is something that can be continued indefinitely?
Well, it's interesting because I'm on a defined contribution plan because back in the 1980s, we went through the same discussion with higher ed. And the higher ed people were basically taken out of TFFR. and we were converted to TIAA-CREF. And for those that wanted to stay in the state pension plan, it was quite a chunk of money back then. It was, for us, it was well over $8,000, which back according to those salaries was an awful lot of money. And, you know, so I am under that plan. But when I look at the plans that they have now, we've got a wide variety of people, especially in the PERS plan. We're not... You know, we had a bill recently, House Concurrent Resolution 3003, that talked about all state retirement plans, not just the PERS main plan that's the main system. We've got the Highway Patrol, we've got the judges, we've got political subdivisions, we've got the Teachers Fund. There are a lot of things that are considered state pension plans. And there are a lot of folks out there that don't want to use state dollars for funding somebody else's pension plans. They said, nobody funds ours, so why should we fund theirs? And so this is one of the problems you have when you're going to put something on the ballot like 3003 was, to put money away for that day in 2046 when the PERS plan main system goes in the tank and they have to have money to pay the people who are either retirees or their beneficiaries. And one of the things they brought up was the old OASIS plan. Well, the OASIS plan was for people back in the pre-Social Security days. And over the last 10 years or so, we had 10 to 13 beneficiaries left. No main pensioners, but beneficiaries. They were getting minuscule amounts of money. And the amount of money in the fund was so small, we put it in the general fund. One people came in and said, well, we're using general fund monies to pay those pensions. Well, they weren't really, because there just wasn't enough money being generated in the OASIS plan to pay off that last person, and I think she died last year at the age of 105, so there are no more people in that plan. But there's still going to be people in the plan in 2046 that we're going to have to provide pensions for. There are some other options too here. When we heard 1452 in Senate GVA, we had a whole slew of folks come in from WSI who were taken out of the plan back when we went, you know, they went off cycle, so to speak.
Well, to be fair, I think they took themselves out of the plan.
Well, I had some interesting information according to what we were told, and so they wanted back in because they were told this was a one-time choice. And so, you know, if we were going to let new people in, they wanted to be turned in. We didn't accept that amendment, but I understand that there's something going on with that, and so.
It's called politics.
In the bill that we have, though, that we sent over to the House that they defeated, there was a study in there. And you know, I'm not short-sighted enough to say that, hey, it's never going to happen. I think if it happens, that we either put a fund away out of the oil extraction tax money that was proposed in that House resolution, or some other plan. That there should be some study done of how do you make the transition? It's just not something that we come in here for 80 days and say, well, this is what we're going to do. No. There's too much at stake here.
Representative Casper, what do you think of that analysis?
Well, Dale, the study is a good idea. However, you have to go back to the basic question. Should the citizens of North Dakota be guaranteeing the employees' retirement benefits, or should they not? And I don't believe they should be. Having said that, for those employees who are under the defined benefit plan, we have the obligation to do that. But for newly hired employees, as the governor said, it's something that needs to be looked at, and I think we ought to be looking at it. But there comes a point in time where you have to fish or cut bait, and that's going to mean the legislature is going to make a decision. Are we going to mandate that all new hired employees go into a defined contribution plan where their contribution and whatever the state contribution is theirs, and they manage it, just like a 401k plan or an IRA plan that most everybody else does? And whatever their accumulation is at retirement gives them a retirement benefit. But the advantage of that is they own the residual. So if their account value has any residual value when they pass away, it goes to the spouse, to the children, and the grandchildren. That's the type of plans that I think we should be in and that we need to go toward. We're not there yet, but we need to make that step.
Do you think that the pension plan, and I'm using the words pension plan to, frankly, encompass a variety of pension plans, a number of them, do you think that they're overly generous?
Under the North Dakota plan right now? Absolutely. Correct. Absolutely, it's overly generous. But, you know, that's the deal the state of North Dakota made with the employees. They have a fantastic defined benefit plan, and we need to honor that obligation. But the question is, how long do we continue to allow new employees to go into a plan that the state of North Dakota citizens are going to continue to have to guarantee. There comes a point in time we have to cut it off.
If you do cut it off and essentially transition everyone to a 401k style plan, how do you manage that in your judgment?
Well, Dale, it's just like any other 401k plan. There would be many investment options in the 401k, and I'm in the securities business, so I help employees manage their 401k plans. I don't manage them for them. They would have investment options, 10, 20, 30 options, depending upon what options are laid on the table. Some would be very safe, like a savings account. Some would be a moderately safe, or like a bond funds or combination bond and stock funds. Some would be aggressive, where you might have some international funds that they could be investing in. And each individual gets to make their own choices, and they manage their own funds. They get advice on what they ought to be doing. They get reports on what's happening, and they manage their own account. So they take the risk, not the state of North Dakota.
I wasn't clear. I'm sorry. What I meant was, and that was useful information you just mentioned, but how does one transition, if we make the policy decision to say that we're not going to offer the defined benefit plan anymore, how do we transition away from that plan while keeping the promise to the folks who are on the defined benefit plan?
Well, first of all, you have to look at where's the defined benefit plan at the point when you make the change, and the actuaries tell you where you're at as far as an unfunded liability. House Concurrent Resolution 3003, I think, is a good concept. It was going to set aside dollars that would be building up in a separate account, so that those dollars would be there to meet any needs for unfunded liabilities in the defined benefit plan if there were unfunded liabilities. And who knows if there ever will be one. We don't know what the market is going to do 3 years. We don't know what it's going to do tomorrow. But we at least can assure that the state of North Dakota will have dollars there to meet those obligations in the defined benefit plan. So you do it. You make the hard choices. You pick a date, and from that date forward, all new employees are in the defined contribution plan. All other employees have the defined benefit plan, and we honor our guarantee to them that we need to do.
Senator Nelson, what do you think of the argument that because the stock market has recovered somewhat from the trench of 2007 and 08, that we can essentially afford to forego raising contributions again to this pension fund and see what happens?
Well, we forget that prior to 2008, we were close to 100% in funding, too. And when you take a dip like many did, and many in the D.C. plan took a huge dip, when you take a look at what happened to those who were managing their own funds, they took a worse hit than the DB plan did. So I don't know. Like I said, there's been this transition before. That's why the Senate GVA put the study in, because we said we know this is going to happen someplace down the line. This is the way things are. There's nothing preventing the people in the current plan from having a 401k and hiring Representative Casper to run it for them if they want. That's certainly what I didn't hire him, but I had several 401ks when I was working in higher ed because I knew that someday we were going to retire, and at that time the wages weren't that good, and we were going to need a certain amount of money to put our kids through school and then to build up a retirement nest egg so we could live comfortable and I could afford to be a legislator out here.
Well, we're glad you were successful along those lines. Representative Casper, what the defined benefit concept is it most? I mean, it's used in, isn't it used in private industry as well as government?
Dale, the defined benefit plan 15 to 20 years ago was probably 80 to 85% of what the retirement plans were. And then as the market began to do what it was doing, people began to see, well, I could make more money if I had a defined contribution plan over time than I can in a defined benefit plan. I'll take a little more risk, but I'd rather go to the defined contribution plan. Nowadays, most companies are in the defined contribution plan in the private sector. Very few, some professional corporations like doctors and dentists, where they're trying to sock away a whole lot of money through tax deductions, which is a whole other issue, not what we're dealing with here, may still have a defined benefit plan because they can put a whole lot of tax deductible dollars away, and that's a whole different issue. But most of them are now defined contribution plans, 401k type.
Senator Nelson, where do you think things will be in the realm of retirement plans for state and local government employees, say, 10 years from now?
Well, I think with the teacher's plan that is on the way to recovery and is not the topic of what we're doing with these plans. They are making, I think, good progress towards the result that they want to see and watching what would happen if those types of situations. With the PERS plan, which is a younger plan, because it was only formed back in about the 60s, whereas the teacher's plan came about back in 1910 and kept keeping the people in all this time. And that's one of the problems we have, is that we now have beneficiaries of people who were teaching back in the 30s and 40s, whereas the PERS plan doesn't have that type of thing. You were talking about some of the benefits that were obtained over the years. Back in 1989, we were still on a legal list of investments. We couldn't even invest in the stock market back there. It had to be money markets and those types of things. And so obviously they weren't doing very well. Once they were given the latitude of being able to invest in other things, they were able to grow the system. And that's why some of these things happen, going from the rule of 90 to the rule of 85, going from the 1 multiplier to the 2 over a period of time, giving some retirees some benefits. The retirees haven't had what some people call a COLA for a very, very long time because we haven't had the money to give to them. And they've been told they're not going to have one.
And there isn't one built in as there
is not. And that's a misunderstanding. A lot of people say, because they see other plans in other states that have built-in COLAs, and they assume that's what part of the problem here. And we do not have a COLA in either plan.
Representative Casper, where do you see the system being in the next 10 years?
In 10 years, I would predict that the PERS plan will be a defined contribution plan. We'll have a fund set aside to help assure the unfunded liabilities of the defined benefit plan are paid. People are getting more and more sophisticated all along about how they invest their own dollars. So I see a solution. It may not be this session, but it's coming.
How tough is it for an individual to manage their own investments when we're in the environment that we are presently, where the stock market is volatile and fixed income instruments don't pay hardly anything? We have almost zero interest rates. And how does that affect the whole dynamic here?
Dale, it's education. The biggest mistake I see people making in their retirement accounts is they're looking at it on a daily or a weekly basis and trying to guess the market. And that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. You need to look at long term. If you're going to retire 10 years from today, as an example, it doesn't really matter what your fund is doing today, if it's your own fund, because over time the market takes care of itself and the risks filter out, and you get a decent return. But if you're jumping in and out on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, that's when you lose your shirt. So you've got to invest. You have to have a risk tolerance profile. You have to understand the decisions of getting out of the market at the wrong time. You know, if the market drops by 50% and you were in stocks, let's say what you have is you have 1,000 shares of something. And so when it drops by 50%, the value might have been 100,000 when it was up there, and it drops to 50,000 in value on paper, but you still have 1,000 shares. If you liquidate your 1,000 shares, they're gone forever. But if you hold your 1,000 shares and continue to add and buy more shares at that reduced price, actually a down market makes you money when you look at the long-term risk of not jumping in and out. Set your strategy, stay the course. When you get 5 to 10 years from retirement, now you begin to look at how you preserve your capital. Insurance companies and investment companies are now coming up with products that will guarantee your retirement benefit, will guarantee your retirement account. You got $1 million in there. They will guarantee that when you retire, regardless of what the market does, you'll have $1 million. You pay a little bit of a premium for that, but you're guaranteed that, and you get an income from that. All new marvelous instruments that not too many people know about.
Representative Casper will be surprised, but I agree with him on that. You do have to write it out. You can't day trade it. It's just not what you do in pension plans.
To what extent, Senator Nelson, do you think that the present pension system is an attraction for state employees who want to come and enter public employment?
I'm not sure if now it's as big a draw as it used to be. But when our wages were very, very low before we started studying things, it was one of the plums that was there, that and the health insurance plan. Those are the things that in some cases back perhaps 20 years ago were used as the plum to get people to come, that they would have full health insurance, and they would have a defined benefit for when they retired in lieu of a salary raise.
Representative Casper, to what extent do you think that the present retirement system is important in recruiting state employees, and if it does go to a defined contribution plan, to what extent will that make recruiting new state employees more difficult?
Well, Dale, I think we're sort of in a new dynamic as far as recruiting state employees with what's going on in North Dakota with our private sector wages increasing with the boom out in the western North Dakota. I think a state employee that comes to work for the state wants to know I have good benefits, I have stable employment, I have an employer that I can enjoy working with, and fellow employees who I can work with, and I have some challenges and maybe some opportunity for upward mobility. But I think the benefits are important, but they're not what they were, as Senator Nelson said 10 and 15 years ago.
Senator Nelson, this is really unusual, but I want you to talk about your presidency of the National Federation of Music Clubs.
National Federation of Music Clubs is an organization of about 120,000 people, and we support American music and musicians. I just came back from a competition in Mississippi where we had 3 teams of piano duo player, 2 teams of piano duo, and they were from Utah, Pennsylvania, and Mississippi, and fantastic young people who were playing. They're looking for a concert career. These are people who are of the conservatory level and above. These are not the kids that are taking piano lessons and playing duets, but we support those too. We send an awful lot of kids up to the International Music Camp. You've got a great club here in Bismarck. They have a meeting on Thursday at your public library. They're going to be featuring some opera people. I'm going to try to attend that meeting. And
we've been talking to Senator Carolyn Nelson. That's the woman whose voice you just heard. She is a Democrat from Fargo. We've also been talking to Representative Jim Casper, the chairman of the House Government and Veterans Affairs Committee. Thank you.